I have too many slides because I teach this as a 2-hour workshop. So I'm going to just show a few slides and then I'm going to do a demo. You can see on the slide that my co-instructor for the workshop from last fall was Brian Whiskey 3. And you can guess where he got his suffix in his call sign, BRI. And his wife has an even cooler call sign, but I'll mention that later if you're curious. So when there's many programs for programming radios, I should define programming as not writing code as in what programmers do professionally, but actually a way of filling out a table that lives on your radio. Modern radios have memory, and you can store things in that memory that are quite useful. The most common thing to store in memory is frequencies, but there's also things that are called offsets and tones, some of which you might want to gradually understand. But one advantage of putting them in memory is that every memory location has a number referred to as a channel. And so once you've figured out where you put things in which channel, you can just select that channel and begin to forget the frequency and the offset and the tone. But it's probably you want some of those on a laminated card somewhere in case you pick up somebody else's radio in an emergency, or somebody hands you a radio and you don't know how it's programmed. There are some standard templates for this information that I'll mention. The software that I'll talk about mostly tonight is called CHIRP. That's probably an acronym. I forgot to look up whether there are 5 words that spell CHIRP, but it's a free program because it's been developed by ham radio operators, a bunch of them, and because there are new radios coming up, they keep improving it to support the latest radio. There's a commercial company called RT Systems that does an equally nice program, but because they make a living at it, for every radio there's a different version of the program, and you can order that online, or you can go to ham radio outlet in Tigard and buy the one that probably matches your radio. When you buy from them, you often will buy their cable for your radio as well. If you use CHIRP, you're going to have to find another source for a cable. Sometimes the radios come with cables, so look in your box to see if you've got a programming cable. If you don't, sometimes you can track the right one down on one of the ham radio sites, or perhaps Amazon. And I'll say just a little bit more about cables a bit later. It's helpful to talk about this diagram, partly because it kind of explains what we're talking about, but also because it decodes some jargon. The words download and upload are used pretty randomly in the computer world, and every time it's used, you pretty much have to ask which is the download and which is the upload. In the big computer world, usually the server is when you put something on the server, it's an upload, and when you put something on your computer, it's a download. With CHIRP, your radio is like the server, and so I put it in this diagram above your laptop that's running CHIRP, because when you put numbers in those channel memory locations on your radio, even if it's a little handheld radio, you're uploading to that radio. When you're taking stuff off your radio and putting it on your computer, that's called downloading. If somebody gives you a file full of this information that's not set up for CHIRP, it's probably in comma separated values format, CSV, and CHIRP allows you to import that format and then save it in the CHIRP format. If you get a bunch of things that you want to share with a buddy and you're not sure that your buddy is using CHIRP, you can export to the CSV format. If your buddy has exactly the radio you have, then it may work to save it and give him your CHIRP file, but the CHIRP files are very specific to your radio, so it's usually safer if you're going to hand somebody information to do it in CSV, because the information on your hard disk in the CHIRP format is probably specific to your radio. So before I launch into a bit more details, any question about this arbitrary terminology? So I'm going to go through some steps, and I'm going to intentionally go faster than you can possibly comprehend unless you've already done all this. And then I'm going to do a demo, and I'll go slower, but I still won't create good understanding. This is very arcane stuff. Unless it just happens to click the first time, you're probably going to want to sign up for a CHIRP class where we can take more time and we can do more hands-on. We usually have breakout sessions where we break people into groups, and we have them share their screen, and we see what they're doing and comment on why it's not doing what they think it should be doing. Sometimes it's just a silly computer problem, often having to do with a cable. I promised to tell a cable story, and I'll get to that. So the first step is installing CHIRP, and this is where you'll find CHIRP on this strange website called Dan Planet, chirp.danplanet.com. If you just type in that first part, you'll get close enough and you'll be able to find it. But this is the full address that's on the screen right now. Then you probably don't want to create a list of all the local repeaters yourself. You can do that if you like by browsing the web to the various club sites, or going to repeaterbook.com and getting a list of local repeaters and carefully typing those into CHIRP. And that works fine. But if you live in Multnomah County, there are two advantages of using this slide. One is it'll save you time, and the other is it will, the first 16 memory channels are, or at least the first 14, are labeled MC1 for Multnomah County 1, Multnomah County 2. And a month later, when somebody says, let's all go to MC6, you'll know what they're talking about, and you'll go to location 6 on your radio, and you'll be in the same place as they are. If you put that same information in location 12, and they say, let's go to MC6, you may go to the wrong place. So ARES stands for Amateur Radio Emergency Service. It's a particular focused area of the national organization called Amateur Radio Relay League. And typically ARES has one club per county, so that's why we have a Multnomah County Amateur Radio Emergency Service. Some of us belong to multiple things. I'll tell you about NET later in the Q&A. I belong to Multnomah County ARES. I belong to Portland Amateur Radio Club. And I also benefit from some of the other clubs like Hoodview Amateur Radio Club, because they have at least one of the local repeaters. So anyway, the two files that I mentioned here, one of them is if your radio is restricted in the number of memory locations. That's pretty common to have. One of my fairly expensive radios only has 99 locations. A lot of inexpensive radios have 128, and a bunch more might support 500. So you kind of choose which template based on how much memory you have on your radio. That same web page will give you printable versions of this information that you might want to print and put in a binder because it's a lot more readable than the comma-separated values that you use for CHIRP. Any questions on this slide? Then step 3 has to do with plugging in your cable and connecting to your radio. Usually you do an initial download so they can get information about your radio, so that it knows what it's doing and it can tell you whether it's compatible. Before you do this, it asks you what radio you think you have, and you select from a menu. And I'll try to demonstrate that a little bit later, but this is the concept. earlier today, I reached into a drawer, grabbed a cable. I was concerned immediately because it was this cable here. Excuse me, I've got to unplug it from my radio. Drop my radio on the floor. This one here. All the cables we're talking about. Excuse me. I dropped the cable on the floor. Here it is. Have a USB connector on one end and some way of plugging into your radio on the other. And this is specific to the Baofeng radios and also works on some Kenwoods and maybe a few others. But I was concerned because it doesn't say Baofeng on this anywhere. And I remembered I bought a $9 cable. And I thought, oh, that's probably not going to work. And sure enough, on the computer I'm using right now, it does not work. It does work on this older laptop I have for reasons I can get into if you have questions. Then finally, I noticed sticking out underneath my desk on the floor was this cable. I found it just in time for tonight's class. And it says Baofeng on it, and it costs almost as much as a radio, about 20 bucks, maybe more. So I can plug that into my USB port, and then I can plug that into my radio. I also got. I plug it in where I would otherwise put the headphones, which seems like a strange place to put a programming cable, but they didn't put a separate data connector on these radios to save money. So you plug it in there, and then there's some other steps which I'll demonstrate. But you're going to want a cable. If you're lucky, your radio came with one. The Baofengs, I'm pretty sure, do not. And you end up investing money in accessories if you have those radios. And I have a couple of them, so I speak from experience on that. Then there are additional steps that here we talk about cables. Here's the $21 cable that actually is the correct cable, and here's the $26 cable. Here's the $9 cable down here that only works on my old laptop. Then you start CHIRP and you do what's called cloning, and again, I'll demonstrate this. It's very confusing the first couple times you do it. Then you may end up either loading a template or hand editing, and then you upload back to your radio to get the stuff back in there. And there's special steps if you have a Yaesu radio. Yaesus, even though they're really nice radios, when it comes to programming them, they're very strange. And then my slides have some more information about importing and exporting, which we'll get to only if we have time, which we probably won't. So I'm going to change my screen share to CHIRP if I can find it on my computer here. Here's CHIRP. All right, here's a table of frequencies that was already on my radio, not because Baofeng programmed them for me, but because I programmed them months ago. And you can see these MCs on the left. Let's see if I can make the font bigger. That's pretty tiny on your end, I think. Well, maybe for now, in the interest of time, I'll just have you squint, and hopefully you can see that in the name column, end call is channel 0. Say again?
It's readable, Bruce, no problem.
Oh, okay. Depends on how big your screen is, and whether you've got good bifocals if you're my age. So then it says MC1. That's number 1, and that is the Portland area Robotics Club's main repeater. And its output frequency is 146.84 megahertz. But if you want to talk to it, you have to talk to its input, and that is 147.4. But rather than memorizing a completely different frequency, there's a convention in the 2-meter band of add 600 kilohertz or 0.6 megahertz, and that's what this number is over here. And the plus says to add it. For some repeaters in the 2-meter band, you actually subtract 600 kilohertz or 0.6 megahertz. So these are the three magic numbers. There are two numbers and a plus or minus. For many repeaters in Portland, there's also a tone, and that's in this column here. You see where the 167.9. Portland Area Robotics Club made the policy decision that their main repeater does not use a tone. Max may know the reason. I can guess the reason for you, but I might guess wrong. The Hoodview Amateur Radio Club out in the Gresham area has a repeater in a different location. Let's see, is MC1 on the mountain up in Clark County, Max, you know?
I don't. I'm actually part of Clackamas County areas.
Okay, but I think this repeater is actually owned by Park.
Which one is that? Oh, the yeah, 14684. Yeah.
Anyway, most of these repeaters live on one of the mountains, not necessarily Mount Hood, but the smaller mountains in the area, or places like Sylvan Hill, which is really a small mountain. And then down here, MC6 is owned by a statewide group called the Amateur Radio Relay Group. It could be called the Oregon Amateur Radio Relay Group, but they didn't put O in their name. There's probably too many things that start with O. And they have lots of repeaters. Some of them are linked to each other, which we could talk about at a different time. So to talk to one of their main repeaters here in Portland, you would select MC6, and it would give you the output frequency, the tone of 100 hertz, which is a subaudible tone, which I'll try to describe if we have time, the plus sign, and the 600 kilohertz or 0.6 megahertz. Those three magic numbers are all stored in MC6. So when you want that repeater, you just select memory to location 6 on your radio. And then there are a few others here. Some of these do not have offsets in frequencies because they're not repeaters. They're frequencies that are used by Multnomah County areas and other groups like the Portland Neighborhood Emergency Teams for direct communication between radios called simplex. So questions about what we're looking at right here? Okay, so let me go back to CHIRP and let's see if I've got this plugged in. I think I can re-plug this in. So I'm going to pretend I haven't done this step yet, and I'm going to say download from my radio. And it's going to give me a long pause and eventually give me a little menu in the middle of the screen. I'm not sure what it's working on, but hopefully it'll come back to us in a minute. And it wants to know if we're using COM10. And this is on our arcane thing, so I might as well show you. If on some laptops, if you type device manager, it will bring this up. If it doesn't, then you can type control panel and select the device manager. And then it gives you a very arcane list of things. And if you know the magic word ports right here in the middle, you click on that and it gives you a list of ports. And one of them is Prolific, and that's the brand name of the chip that lives in the cable. And that's a really important chip that knows how to talk to the USB port of your radio and how to talk to your radio. Excuse me, the USB port of your computer, and on the other end, how to talk to your radio. So if it comes up and says Prolific, it probably means you got a name brand cable, and it's probably going to work. And it does say COM10, so I previously figured that out before class. But if it said 3 and I looked it up here and it said 10, I would go back to this menu and I would select 10 from the list. And I already selected Baofeng or Baofeng, depending on how you pronounce that, is the brand of my little radio. If mine looks bigger than yours, it's because I bought an extended battery. It's really the same, other than the battery. And it is the one of the cheapest ones, UV5R. You can see it has lots of other UVs. These are all Baofengs. But if you scroll down, if you select a different vendor, like Kenwood, I own a Kenwood, which happens to use the same cable for some nice reason. It claims it can detect my model for me, but I can also select it from this list. So this program supports a lot of different radios. But I want the Baofeng, and I want the UV5R, and I say okay, and it says, oh, turn your radio off. Sometimes you can get away without doing that, but I'll follow the list. I'll turn it off. Connect the cable. Make sure you push it all the way in. If you push it halfway in, it won't work at all. Then turn it back on. And then make sure that there's nobody talking on your radio, that it's quiet, and then click OK. Cloning is another metaphoric term for it's taking the brain of my radio and putting it in my computer. So it's cloning this brain into my computer so that I can make changes and then clone it back. When I did this the first time, it had maybe one of these frequencies, maybe none of them filled in from the factory. I then went to File, and I did an import, and I searched on my computer for that template that I got off the Multnomah County Aries site. And if I went and found that now, I could import it, and it would in fact have all this information in it. And then I could say, well, there is one thing I want to change. Let's say I never use this number 17. Don't even really know what that is. And I've got another favorite repeater that maybe in the template is 199, but I want to put it in position 17. So I can type that information in right here if I know what it is and I'm typed carefully. And then when I'm done, I can put all of this in my radio by saying upload to radio. And there's another long pause, and it'll eventually give me a little menu. There it is. Once again, it wants to know if it's really content. It really is. Baofeng is still true. UV5R is still true. I say okay. It tells me to turn my radio off again. And then it tells me to plug in the cable, turn it back on. That volume may need to be 100%, so I'll turn it all the way up. Make sure that nobody's talking on my radio because it would interfere, because this is also the headset connector. Then I click OK. And that's now cloning in the other direction. And there's a little green light flashing off and on here saying all that information from my computer is now being cloned back into the radio. So I could go on and on, but everything I said would just add to the confusion. So if I stop now, I can take some questions on this topic. And then when the questions get off the topic, I'll turn it back to Max to facilitate that.
So this is Wilt. I have one question.
Sure.
So several weeks ago, I downloaded CHIRP and had success with it, but I was going to use it again, and it said I needed to re-download it because it's been upgraded. And I understand it's frequently upgraded.
Correct.
But I got an error message that said the error opening file for writing. And I tried it 3 or 4 times. And I always got that same error message.
Was that while you were trying to upgrade?
Yes, while I'm trying to upgrade CHIRP.
Okay. 2 thoughts. One is some people say keep your CHIRP updated because you'll never know when they fixed a bug that'll save you a headache. Or you never know when they've added a radio that you may want to buy or borrow. Other people will argue if it's working, don't upgrade because they may introduce a bug, or you might run into the problem you ran into. I upgraded the one on this laptop today, and it refused to update it because I had already started CHIRP. So I had to close down CHIRP and say retry, and eventually it agreed to upgrade it. That may not have been what happened to you, but that's what happened to me today.
Okay. Now, do you know what that function of writing is? Is that a vital function? Because there was an option to ignore it, but writing seemed pretty important to me.
Yeah, writing can mean a lot of things in the computer world. It could have meant that it was trying to update a data file, and that file was open and didn't want to change it while it was being used. It could have meant that it was trying to actually upgrade the code on your hard drive, and it detected that you were currently using that code because you were using CHIRP. Sometimes just closing a program and retrying it will fix it. Sometimes you have to use a big hammer and actually reboot your computer. Sometimes even that doesn't fix it, but those are the tricks I use when it happens to me.
Okay, well, I appreciate your thoughts.
You're welcome.
Whiskey 7 Echo Lima Charlie.
See, I should know who that is. That's Edie in Maplewood. Somebody's talking to Edie. So I can bring the slides back up if there are questions that the slides will help on, or you had questions on, or I can take questions about what we're looking on the screen right now.
So Bruce, one of the things that's happening in the chat right now is that there are two popular software programs. One is CHIRP, which is the open source free software. There's another one called RT Systems that is not open source, and you do have to pay for it. And there are benefits to one or the other. Myself, I have purchased RT Systems products in the past and have used them successfully, but I've also used CHIRP successfully. Could you talk a little bit more about those two?
Sure. I mentioned RT Systems briefly. The advantage is that, in my experience, when you buy it, it's configured for your radio if you selected the right version when you went shopping. And usually when you buy it, it either comes with a cable, or there's a sister cable, or you have the option of getting the right cable for your radio. So using RT Systems can save you a lot of trouble of trying to guess what cable is going to work with your radio, and etc. But it will cost you a few bucks, and you may have to pay again when you buy your next radio. I also use RT Systems cables for other things, like when you get into data mode, when you get to that in ham radio, you need a cable that runs between your computer and your radio for sending data back and forth. And for one of my Kenwoods, the best cable was the RT Systems cable. So I got that. A friend of mine programmed my Kenwood because he wanted to see it. He said, "I'll tell you what, bring over your brand new Kenwood and I'll program it for you." But I still needed the cable for data. And then a couple months ago, I needed to change one of the things that he did for me, and that same cable was golden. So RT Systems was my friend in that case for a really good cable. If you have a Yaesu radio, they have software called ADMS, and I forget what ADMS stands for. There's a rumor that they contracted with RT Systems to create that software for them, but I haven't confirmed that. And the Yaesu handheld that has 70 in its name, I think always comes with a cable, and the software, if you want to use their software, you download that from the Yaesu site. If you want to use CHIRP, because the templates I told you about are not compatible with ADMS, then you probably still want to download the Yaesu software, and install it so that you get the driver for the cable that came with your radio, so that you can use the free cable with the software that comes from CHIRP. And there's more to that story. I actually did a conversion for that particular radio, so you can actually use ADMS if you want to, but you have to know the secret location for Bruce's version of the Multnomah County Aries file, which I'm happy to point you at. It's not actually a secret. Follow-up questions on that?
So I would just say, just to be clear, if you were to buy RT System software and a cable, you can't use that cable with CHIRP. Is that right?
There's a pretty good chance you could.
Okay.
But if you got this, the official RT System software, you're probably motivated to use it, unless it gives you trouble that most people don't have. Most people that have the RT System software like it. Some of them will go away from it if they buy 2 more radios and don't want to buy 2 more versions of RT Systems.
Just a comment here. From experience, you'll end up collecting 2, 3, or 4 or 5 radios, handhelds. You know, I have the ASU, I have an ICOM, I have Baofungs, and pretty quick, you know, if you buy the commercial programming software each time for the different radio, you start to look at a lot of money. Or you have friends who have different radios and they want to program it. So that's why I always urge people to start with CHIRP and try to get it to work, because it's cross-platform, and you know, you can do quite a bit with different brands. So that's just sort of a, you know, some experience there.
This is Jay again. I'd like to offer a tip. I bought a cable for my FT60 and tried to use CHIRP to program it. And I was having trouble with it and connecting, let's say. And it turned out the solution was to remove 1 millimeter or 2 off the tip of the plug.
Oh, right.
Completely seated, but in fact, apparently it wasn't connecting. And the person that sold me the cable, it was a ham online, said that sometimes the plugs were a little bit long. So just pass that along.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I hadn't run into that one, but I believe it. I programmed a friend's Baofeng, and when I pulled the plug out of it, the speaker no longer worked because it had disabled the speaker as part, because it thought I'd plugged in the headset, and then it didn't re-enable it. So I bought my friend a headset because I didn't want to buy him a new radio.
So now you own another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Kirk. Also, while just as a point, the programming software makes this really easy. If you want to spend an afternoon pushing buttons, all this information can be hand entered into your radio.
That's true. And
This makes it easy to put in 10, 20, 100 different items in relatively short order. If you want to program 1 or 2 channels, repeaters, whatever, you can actually just go in and, depending on the radio, do a few button pushes to do it. It can be a little tedious, but you can do it if you're so inclined.
yeah, I agree. If you had a screenshot of my screen here, or you went and looked at the PDF file I told you about, hand entering these 16 or the first 14 here wouldn't take too long if you live in Multnomah County, and you could do that instead of doing that import step that I mentioned.
So this is Barry. I can't speak, I can't, I have nowhere near the experience of Bruce or Dan, and I certainly defer to them, but as someone who's a total newbie who had to figure all this stuff out without the benefit of this talk today, I went to Baofeng. They had links for the CHIRP, the CHIRP free. I found a website for Macs, and they had links for CHIRP, for CHIRP software. And all of them said that I needed, for this Mac, up to that Mac, you had to have a certain driver, once you got past a certain thing, Apple put their own drivers in, whatever it was. And I don't know if I erased the right driver or installed the wrong one or installed the right one, but the software wasn't work. I have no idea. But I tried all of the free options, and it was the communication. And I had an official Baofeng cable, which I bought when I bought my radio, my handheld radio, and I was ready to knock my head against the concrete wall because I could not get it to work. And I came across the link for RT Systems. And other than some minor glitches installing it, which I sent them an email, they literally answered me in a half an hour, and I had it up and running with their cable. So it's not terribly pricey, but it costs money, obviously. I think that I think that the intent, the best thing to do is try the free options, and if you can't get that to work, I would go to the RT Systems.
Yeah.
And in terms of,
if we had this session a month ago, and before you went through all of that, and you said, I've got a Mac, what should I do? I would give you a facetious answer, and that would be find a cheap PC and do with that. And then the serious answer would be, you probably don't want to use CHIRP. You probably want to invest in RT Systems if you have a Mac.
I'll just counter that. As a dedicated Mac person, I get no issues. With getting the correct driver, getting CHIRP to work. So
Mac?
yeah,
Well,
works fine.
I'm gonna have to remember because when I teach this class, I always get Mac people and I can't help them. So I'm gonna send them to Dan.
Yeah, we can get them fixed up. There's a whole bunch of folks on our net teams that are programming with their Macs. Yeah, it's not tricky, but you just, if you're familiar with Macs, you know what to do. And so it's not hard. I wouldn't be scared by that.
well, I would comment that I'm more than a lifelong user. I've worked on Macs since before the Mac was there. I'm actually an Apple Lisa user from way back before most people even knew what Macs were. And I will tell you that I am very familiar with doodling around with all this crap, and I tried. I spent hours downloading, uploading, re-downloading the software. I couldn't get it to work. I kept getting communication errors. So I have no idea what it was. I went into the programming mode. I erased things. I installed things, erased everything, reinstalled everything. I could not get it to work. And so I strongly second the RT Systems, but I definitely worth obviously giving it a try, because if Dan says it works, I'm sure for some, or maybe even a lot of people, it will work. But just to know that the RT Systems is a backup for you. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for your talk, Bruce. It's really great.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody else have a question or a thought before I hand it back to Max?
Bruce, I know with RT Systems and, I'm sorry, with CHIRP, some cables, well, not just with CHIRP, actually, I should say that there are cheap cables, there are counterfeit cables, and then there are good cables. Do you have any suggestions on where to buy or get good cables?
Let's see if I answered that question on that slide. I vaguely remember that I did. I just need to say new share. Go to this slide. And again, I can make that bigger. So it looks like one good place is to go to the Baofeng a website if it's a Baofeng that you have. If you've got a Yaesu, try to get a cable from Yaesu if it didn't come in the box. Likewise for a Kenwood or one of the other name brands. If you can't find what you're looking for that way, either use a reputable ham radio outfit like Ham Radio Outlet, or read lots of reviews on Amazon to try to decode whether the $20 cable is a counterfeit with the correct chip, or an actual brand name with the correct chip, or a counterfeit with a bad chip that's going to waste a lot of your time. But I have not shopped all possible cable combinations. Another option I mentioned earlier, even if you're not sure you're going to end up buying RT System software, you might find that they have exactly the cable you need, and they're a reputable supplier. And then in most cases, that cable will be compatible with CHIRP, assuming CHIRP supports your radio. That's what I found with my one of my two Kenwoods. Let's see. Max, when you start taking Q&A, a question that I can field if there's time is, what were these other classes I was talking about? But that's not specific to CHIRP, so I'll hold my tongue.
Okay. Well, any other questions for Bruce? Cool. I think we can just open up the Q&A, and Bruce and Dan can help answer any questions in general, either on programming your radio or ham radio in general.
Yeah, this Jim, my radio has been programmed okay, but the question comes up and I can't figure it out of the darn, I've got a Yaesu and the manual is very unclear how to do a manual input. And I'm sure that's different for every single handheld, but I have to go back and read that manual about 5 times to see if I can make a checklist on how to do a manual input.
Oh, Jim, what radio?
Is it a 60? FT60?
Oh, you're muted, Jim.
It's the Yaesu FT4.
Oh, yeah, but your general point is correct. I've helped a lot of people with their Yaesus, and usually it involves me downloading the manual and them looking at their downloaded or hard copy manual, and we spend about an hour trying to decipher the arcane language. And it's not all based on language barrier. There's some folklore in ham radio that makes things very non-obvious. If I had 5 minutes, I'd tell you the story about what does the word band mean. It means 3 different things, and I've seen it used in 2 ways in the same sentence. So you are in great company if you find these manuals hard to figure out.
Okay.
Yeah, and my comment would be just that the Yaesu FT4, I don't think it's that one. I think it's a similar one. I think maybe it's a FT7 or 70. It's not similar to the FT60. And it is different. I actually kind of haven't been able to program that radio because I would have to look into the manual itself. But you said you're able to program it using CHIRP?
I had a friend do it. Mary Lee's husband did it for me. So I've got the full was it 150 or whatever it is? Got the small menu of installation, but I've got all the frequencies we need for primarily for the net business.
Okay. No, that's great. And I am so bad about programming my radio. I usually end up just using the VFO and then just putting in the frequencies that I need. It's kind of bad practice though. I really need to sit down and program my radio like I should. And that's kind of why we have, this talk, and Bruce, I'm sure, has classes on how to do it. It's really the best way to do it.
Max, I'm also the one that asked you the question just the other day on the wires on this thing, and I find nowhere does it mention wires on this radio or in the manual. So I'm going to have to assume I don't have it.
Oh yeah, and most people with wires, this is very specific for Yaesu radios, they will accidentally turn wires functionality on, and what ends up happening is when you push to talk, it will send out or transmit a chirp just for half a second before any speech comes through. And so the issue is that most of the time it cuts off the first word that anybody says when chirp is enabled. As long as you don't have chirp enabled, that's a good thing. I personally have never used I'm sorry, as long as you don't have wires enabled, that's a good thing. I personally never used wires. I'm sure that there are people that do, and it works very well, but for most ham radios, what you want to do is make sure that's turned off.
This is Kirk. For my Yaesu 991A, there is a separate manual for the wires stuff. It's not in the general user guide and manual. You have to go find the separate manual for wires.
Kirk, that's actually a really good point. Yaesu,
Thank you for that.
yeah, they do publish different manuals. So when I got my FT400, I actually, it came with, I think, 4 different manuals. APRS is a completely separate manual.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, ham radio related?
Hey there, Max. This is John, KJ7UJD.
Oh, hey, John.
Hey, I know that we had some talk about antennas going out, and the barber pole antenna kits I know are probably coming along. I'm setting up my what I call my station, my home base ham radio station. So I have a Yaesu FT847 transceiver, and I got a Yaesu 25 amp power supply coming in the mail on Monday. And my question is, I'm looking for a good dual band antenna that can handle the power output of that 25 amp power supply. Because when I do 13.8 times 25, I get, was it darn near 350, I think. So my question is, and again, it's a very amateurish question. Do I need to worry about overpowering an antenna? Will it like melt or catch fire on the side of my house or something crazy? And do you know of a good solution for a good dual band antenna? I only have technician class, so I think I think the limit there is 200 watts for transmission. But yeah, could you talk on that? Maybe just kind of start spilling what you know about that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I can just give you some general answers, and then I'm sure that there's other people that can chime in with what good antennas there are. So in general terms, oftentimes if you build a dipole, even with the thinnest of wire, and I'm not talking like 30 gauge, but 18 gauge can handle a lot of power. It's only when you start using things like chokes or ball-ends or magnetic loop antennas that you kind of have to worry about how much power you're putting through a wire or an antenna. There are most commercial antennas that are sold can handle 300-400 watts of power at VHF UHF levels, so there's not a lot of issues there.
I was just
Go
going
ahead,
to
Dan.
jump in.
Yeah.
What brand of radio are we talking about, and what's the model number?
This is hey Dan, good to talk to you.
Yeah,
This is a Yaesu FT847.
Oh, an 847.
Yeah.
What's the power output on 2 meters?
I have no idea.
Yeah, because it's probably, I'm going to guess that it's probably limited, to maybe 50 watts.
So it's got the radio transceiver itself has a regulator in it, so to speak, so that it doesn't overpower itself. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not immediately familiar with that radio, but there's not a direct relationship between the amperage of the power supply and the output of the radio. So you probably wouldn't, unless you already have a power supplier, or are planning to add other devices on, you probably don't need one that big just to run the radio. Oh, it can't hurt. But I'm I'm going to guess, let's see, the 847, we can look it up, but probably on HF, it's probably going to be 100 watts maximum. And typically what they do is they back those off to 50 watts, in which case you're not going to have any issues at all, assuming you have some sort of reasonable coax, between, the radio and the antenna.
Yes,
Dan,
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 I looked that up. So it is 50
Yeah.
watts on 2 meters and
Yeah.
70
So
centimeters.
So you're totally safe.
Yeah.
Most of the radios are actually going to, have a, they're limited by, the various output circuitries to certain powers. And I think you're going to find, depending on what you're trying to do, VHF, UHF, that 50 watts is going to do probably 90% of what you want to do, unless you get into some of the more specialized, activities on VHF, UHF.
I agree with what you folks just said. Usually, when you're operating at 50 watts, if you cut it back to 25, nobody will be able to hear the difference. If you double it to 100, people can't hear the difference. If you get your antenna up an extra 20 feet, that can make a huge difference. So the difference between running a 5-watt handheld and a 25-watt desktop or mobile can be large. But usually the biggest difference is once you leave the handheld, you start investing in antennas, and the antennas make even bigger difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, even a handheld with even a handheld with an external antenna makes a huge difference.
And that's just a Baofeng.
Yeah.
But you should be fine. Now let's get back to your original question, which is dual band antennas. Are you looking for something of a more permanent or semi-permanent installation, or just something portable?
Yeah, Dan, this would definitely be something permanent, installed on either end of the roof. I got to test out a sweet spot on the roof.
Sure.
Yep. And so I'm looking for something maybe discreet, but probably a vertical.
Right, exactly. I would say probably maybe Bruce can chime in here. I'm not immediately familiar, but pretty much anything from Comet or what's the other company? There's another company that makes it's Comet and Bruce, help me out here. Yeah. Who's the other one?
Arrow is probably what you're thinking of.
Verticals. They do the beams, don't they?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
there's Diamond I like.
Diamond is yeah. So another option that's a little bit strange, but I've got one, and everybody I know that has one thinks it was a good investment. for between 50 and 60 bucks, you can get a Tram 1480, which is definitely dual band. I've heard that if you leave it out in the rain for 5 years, eventually it gets waterlogged, but usually it's the cable that gets waterlogged first, not the
What?
antenna.
What is it again?
The Tram 1480.
Hmm.
I think you can get it from a lot of places. The place I got it, it was super strange. I got it from homedepot.com. But the ham radio outfits will sell it to you, usually for another $10 more than Home Depot. But you might want to reward them for their service by buying from a ham radio outlet. Yeah, so anywhere from the Tram to the Comet to the Diamonds, you can get a lot of value. Oftentimes, you'll end up spending as much on a tripod and a mast or more than the antenna itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to share my screen. So this is a ham radio outlet. Looks like they're out of stock there everywhere. Look, $80 though will get you a dual band. So that's 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Fiberglass, which does last a long time. It is a little over 8 feet tall, which is pretty good. And it doesn't really, it's not a big ugly eyesore. So it's might even be wife approved. The other one that we talked about, this is the one that I have on one end of my roof, is the Diamond X50. Diamond also makes some other antennas that are very similar. They're just taller. So this one, I believe, is 66 inches tall, but they make ones that are 10 and 15 feet tall. And it is kind of funny. I've seen videos of their tallest, I think it's about 15 feet, in heavy windstorms. And they do whip around, but they are built to survive major storms. And they work really well. The other one that I would like to mention is the Ed Fong. This is also a dual band VHF UHF, and he calls it the DBJ1. He publishes directions on how to build it online. However, if you'd like to purchase one, Ed Fong is a professor down, I believe it's Stanford, and he and his students build these antennas, and they sell them on eBay is the place you want to look for them. Just search for Ed Fong DBJ-1, and $46 plus $3.50 shipping will get you everything except for the brackets, or how you're going to mount it to your roof, and the 5-foot section of 3/4 inch PVC. And it's, once you have those two things, it's very easy to put up. It is not a ground plane antenna, so you don't have the ground planes that are sticking off to the side of the other two, but it works very well. Anyway, that's
yeah, I think Max, you have the tri-band version.
I do. So he does, and I don't see it for sale on eBay, but yes, he also makes a tri-band version. And if you just contact him by email, he can easily sell you one of those. And I think I paid $50 for it at a ham fair, and it included the PVC pipe.
Yeah, I was with Max at the Pacificon when he had to get it on the airplane.
Yes.
But yeah, I have the dual band Ed Fong, and just so you know, when you're looking at it, that is what you're looking at in the picture is a PVC pipe, and the antenna is enclosed inside the PVC pipe. So basically, what you're doing is you're assembling it, but it's quite easy to, inside the pipe, and and for up here, as with most antennas, it's just something that you would need to, make sure to get it weatherproof. Which there's many good sealants, and use that installation. And I've used that to good effect. I have that up as a dual bander, and I run 50 watts through it, no problem. So that's another option.
about once a year, I teach an antenna class, sometimes twice a year, and I've created a shopping list, mostly of things that I've purchased over the years. One advantage of teaching an antenna class is when I buy another antenna and Pat says, "Why do you need another antenna?" I say, "Because I teach a class on antennas." And so I just posted a link to many things I purchased and a few things that I hope to purchase.
What's your favorite, whichever the current one is?
Well, my favorite right now is an Arrow 10-element beam, and but that I might as well spend 2 minutes on it. Your first antenna should be an omnidirectional antenna, because when you're trying to reach a variety of repeaters and talk locally or not so locally, simplex to other people directly to their radios, you don't want to have to ask which direction are they. You just want to cross your fingers and hope that you can hear them and they can hear you, or you're both using a repeater that you can both reach. So the Tram, the Comet, the Diamond are all good choices. The Edfong, you can make your own antenna. There's several good designs. Sometime we can talk about making your own J-pole. But occasionally you'll want an antenna that's highly directional. And the obvious reason is because you're trying to reach a station in a particular direction or a repeater that's not close to you, and you want a good solid connection to that repeater. So you can get a 5-element beam, I think for $75. The only reason I have a 10-element beam is they shipped me the wrong one, and I called them up and said, "Do I owe you more money?" And they said, "We'll meet you halfway." So I have a 10-element beam. But I live in Southwest, and I can point it towards Portland from here and hear a lot of different Portland stations that I would barely be able to hear with my Omni. And all my buddies that are local, I can hear off the back side of my beam, even though I'm not supposed to be able to do that, but they're so close it doesn't matter. So right now I have the beam set up on a fiberglass pole in my backyard, and when the grass starts to grow, I'm going to have to take it down. Beams may eventually be on your shopping list.
I'll just sort of throw in some stuff. There was, in fact, I think a gentleman at the beginning of the session who was talking about POTA and SOTA, Parks on the Air, Summits on the Air, and some of us have been using the Arrow beams when we do a SOTA activation. And I know Max has got one that he found. And
Yes.
we've used that on for when we're out some miles away up on a hill with good success. So, and that's some of the more portable ones. I assume, Bruce, yours is probably more robust and more of a fixed.
It's bigger and it's 2 meters only. Is the one you're talking about that cool one that is 70 centimeters in one direction, 2 meters in the other?
I think, is that it, Max?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Edie, who somebody was talking to on the radio, her suffix is Echo Lima India or Echo Lima Charlie. No, wait a minute. I get Barbara and Edie mixed up. One of them has the same antenna you guys are talking about.
And of course, we're going a little deeper in the weeds. But if you're using CW or sideband on 2 meters, with then you would rotate the antenna on its axis to obtain either vertical or horizontal polarization, depending on the mode. For most of what we're talking about, FM is vertical polarization.
Right.
And
but when you with that antenna, if you're doing voice and you're switching between 70 centimeters and 2 meters, you need to rotate it when you switch bands.
Yeah, it's got a little handlebar, bicycle grip.
Cool. And just If you'd like to keep the chat down by where you type in a message, there's the little three ellipse, the three dots, the ellipse. If you click on that and you click on save chat, you can actually just save that directly to your computer. And do we have time for one more question if anybody has a question about ham radio? And if not, does anybody know what our next topic is going to be? That's right.
Max, you should know that.
I know. All right. So yeah, we skipped a week. We skipped Morse code, voice and digital. We'll actually come back to that in a future session. So next week, we're going to be talking about ARRL membership, kind of the benefits, what ARRL is. I got to remember, I don't know if you saw my email. It's not Amateur Radio Relay League. It's American Radio Relay League, I believe. It's a great organization that benefits all of ham radio. So we'll talk about all the things that you can get from ARRL.
Oh, Max, before I forget about it, this, Nick wasn't, on this session tonight, so he wanted me to be able to log in, the information.
Oh yeah,
So if you
and
wanna-
I'll send that to you.
Yeah, and after if you can stick around after we sign off, I'll talk to you
Yeah.
about the antenna. Oh, one
Okay.
last thing, and Bruce, if you're still there, are you familiar with our 2-meter antenna kit, our barber pole that we put together?
I got an email about it today, that there are kits now available for purchase, so you can make your own. Is that the same story?
Yeah, that's the one that's from QSG. It's October, the October QSG. And
Oh,
we-
yeah, that's why
Yeah.
I heard about it in the magazine, yeah.
Yeah, basically we've tweaked it a little bit, but Max and I have built them. I've got one up, and even at 5 or 6 feet off the ground, the thing is outperforming a lot of other antennas. I'm pretty surprised. It's actually a vertical dipole, is what it is.
Okay,
Yeah, so very interesting design.
so it's 1 meter tall then for the 2-meter band?
Yeah,
So-
actually, the
It's about
just
19 inches.
spiral. Yeah, 18 inches is the active element.
Huh.
Yeah. Take a look. If you have the October QSD, take a look at that.
Okay, yeah, I do have it. I'll
Yeah.
go back and look. It's
Yeah.
counterintuitive how you get a half-wave dipole out of 18 inches, but I'll look it up.
Well, it's spiraled. It's a helix. So
Oh, okay, that
Yeah,
explains it intuitively anyway.
Yeah, yep,
But now you got me even more curious.
you should build one. It's fun and it works quite well. Super lightweight, very interesting. And
Yeah.
we're just doing it at cost, for folks. So it gives them a real nice way to get on 2 meters.
You bet.
Yeah.
So you saw me put some stuff in chat about classes and links and how to get on a Google group. Max, I clicked on that save chat. I've been looking for that feature. Thank you. But
Yeah.
where does it save it to?
So when you do that, then it will pop up a dialog box that should. Oh, actually, if you do it, they changed it. So it'll tell you that the chat was saved, and then there's a little link that says show in folder. At least that's what happens on my computer. And so
Oh,
you may
so
just have to do it again, just save it again, and then it'll pop up a dialog.
Okay. And there's also a little file icon. Oh, there, show in folder. I get it.
Yep.
Okay, there it is.
Um,
Saved
Hey,
it
Max,
in- There's a Zoom folder on my computer.
Hey, Max, there was a question on the chat about links to the barber pole. To the
Yes,
kit.
let me
So-
get that for you.
Yeah, yep.
So the this link is to our page that I created for ordering the barber pole antenna. However,
We have the
there's also
YouTube.
there's also the second sentence will have a link to the YouTube on that page. In fact, let me just paste that in there.
Yeah.
Give me just a second. So this second link will be the YouTube of the February meeting.
Yeah, you can see Max at work.
Yeah, Den helped a lot. He built another antenna. It works really well for 2 meters, and it can, I'm sure, do 500 watts of power out. You'll just want to be careful and do an RF survey before you attach and transmit 500 watts at that
Yeah,
frequency.
It's kind of fun.
John asked about the park meeting, and then they had a follow-up question about repeaters. Are you doing both Zoom and the park repeater for those meetings right now?
We are. So the second Monday of every month at 7 o'clock is the regular park meeting. And we broadcast that park meeting out on the 147.18 repeater here in Portland. And we will occasionally stop and ask if anybody has any questions from the repeater. And so just to ask a question, all you have to do is throw out your call sign on the repeater, and then we can actually have a two-way conversation. And I know it looks like John asked if it's linked to any other repeaters. I don't believe so. I don't think that there's any, at least not regular linking. It's been a while since I looked at it, so I'm not sure if there's IRLP or Echo link on there.
Can I follow that up, Max?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just me and actually, so I'm KJ7UJ Delta, and Echo and Foxtrot, we met on the air, and we're just new hammies who just happened to be in the same room when we took the test and met each other on the air or through ham radio. And we thought it'd just be really neat just to have a beginner ham radio net on the air. We were thinking about using the park repeater. What is that? 147 Mark 18. But I think it's up on Mount Scott, so it's got great east side coverage for transmit and receive. But both Echo and Foxtrot unfortunately live on the west side, like in the Beaverton and Aloha area. There are linked repeaters, like the Western Oregon Radio Club has repeaters that are linked, and they also have time slots which have had old nets. Or in other words, they had time slots which used to be occupied by like the Northwest Astronomy Net, for instance, Sunday nights at 10. And I think from having listened to that time slot and not heard the net, but having heard the repeater itself, dial into the node and connect itself, I was thinking that, is it, well, let me ask you this. Is it possible? And I have asked WRORC, but I've gotten no reply. Is it possible to like revive a net time slot or utilize a net time slot if the repeaters are linked but no one is using them anymore?
Yeah, and I think I understand your question, that if it's linked at that time, could you use that if the other net is no longer meeting? That's one possibility. The other possibility is just to pick a new time slot and contact the repeater owner or administrator. So for example, for Park, that would just be, you could just email into w7lt@awrl.net, and you can find the contact information for repeater owners and just ask them, hey, Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, can I host a net, and can I link the repeaters? And most, the majority of times they will probably be very amenable to that, even if you're just linking them yourself. And that way you can kind of link which repeaters that you want. So if you have other people that are in, Ohio or Utah or wherever, that's definitely a possibility. I will say that you should be able to, the 147.18 repeater should have pretty good coverage all around Portland. So unless you're trying to contact people like in Eugene or other places that are tens or hundreds of miles away, you should get coverage. You can also try just the other 146.84 repeater to see if you can contact other people in Portland. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And, you know, I think it ties in nicely as far as programming your radio, because I got all these, again, from that the link that was shared earlier, the Multnomah County Aries CHIRP file, which also comes as a PDF, so you can print it off as a list. And then I've just been filling in pencil as I program it along in the CHIRP file.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? So I was talking on, I have it as channel 73s, actually, for this club's repeater on 147.180. But what was the other frequency you mentioned?
That'd be 146.84. And Bruce, do you have
684.
that programmed into the Multnomah County?
Yeah, that's channel 1.
Channel 1. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if
So
you're
it is.
trying to cover, and maybe Bruce knows better being on the west side, if he was trying to get Beaverton and Aloha as well as east
I have-
side.
With repeaters, there's always 7 answers, so I've got 1 more or 1.5 more.
Okay.
MC6 repeater is on Sylvan Hill. So at least at a glance, that's going to give you propagation for Washington County, Columbia County, and Clark County, and Multnomah County. But there may be a shadow or two somewhere.
Is that the 04? I'm
That's
sorry.
an ARG.
14704.
Yeah.
So
coin
to
tower.
schedule on that, if you want to try, well, you could do an experiment first. Just have your friends get on at a random time that's it's not busy and see if it works for you. If it does, that website, Amateur Radio Relay Group website, has a very nice form for requesting a time, and they get back to you pretty quickly with an answer if you fill out their form completely. And then get this, almost all the time, that particular repeater is linked to at least one other. So you get twice as much coverage as what I even understand. And the only reason I know that is that on one of the nets that we use it for on Sundays, we don't want to bother all those people in the other counties, so we have them delink it for us. So there are various combinations.
Does that link to the 3.2? Is that primarily the South Central?
I think you're right. I think it's linked to
Yeah.
the 3.2, but we've never used it when it's linked, so I haven't memorized it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. ARRG are pretty good people. They should give you a pretty good. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea to have a net like that for the new folks. So everybody can bandy about. Bruce runs an excellent program on Sunday nights, which is somewhat similar. I mean, it's a little more directly focused, but might well be worth checking out. Maybe you could talk to that better.
Yeah, then let me be unusual for myself and try to be brief. If you're half interested in how these radios relate to emergency communications, check out either the ChatNet at 7 p.m. Sundays or the NetNet at 8:10 p.m. Sundays. They're on 2 different repeaters. And we encourage you to check in even if you don't have anything to say, but even without a license, you can listen, and with a license, certainly. The ChatNet is on a fairly obscure repeater that I'll try to paste in the information before I log off, but the NetNet is on the MC6 repeater, which is in that template I talked about. The output frequency is 147.04. And if you want to know what the topic is in advance, you join that Google group that I mentioned way up in the chat, and you'll get an email from me on Friday afternoon giving you the Sunday topics. And with that, I'll try to go find the information about the 7 p.m. repeater.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, it seems like there's interest about doing the net, and I know that for me, even before I got my license, but as I was certainly studying for it, just being able to listen to, like, for instance, the Insomniac net every night is massively entertaining. It comes on at 11 p.m. and it, for insomniacs like myself, just to be able to hear that really sort of motivated me to want to study harder to get the license sooner. And then being able to check in at that was a real, like, treat. So I think that having something that's on the air, I love the Zoom meetings because everyone can participate, but I don't know, as a hammy, as a licensed ham radio operator, I really like keeping things on the air.
That's where it should be. That's our goal. Get out in the air. That's what we say.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And since you've got an 847, you can start exploring all the HF spectrum. And there's a whole nother world.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm
Yep.
So thanks
Cool.
for running this net, even if it is cheating and on Zoom. No, seriously, I do. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And it was certainly very helpful, and I look forward to it every Thursday night.
That's
I like that
right.
it's weekly too. Thanks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I want to thank Bruce very much for presenting this great topic. I'm glad that he did it and I didn't, because he clearly knows a lot more about programming radios than I do. And I want to thank Dan for joining and giving some input. I appreciate that. So thank you, everybody. And this video will be up on the YouTube channel in a couple of days. And next week's topic is ARRL membership benefits, and I'll see everybody then.